Hi everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Boz channel. I am flying solo tonight. So it's Sunday night and I often have a patient or a patient guest on my show on Sunday nights to show some of the counseling and coaching I do for the ketogenic diet, but I am flying solo. Hold on one second. I have one little button that's doing, there we go. I had a button pushed, so now I fixed that. I have a couple of announcements that I want to make, just kind of the outline for tonight, and then I have about 20 sticky notes on my screen just to make sure I try to stick to what I said I'm going to do. So we're going to start with a little bit of review on something that's changed on the YouTube site. I just want to show some of the newer people where some of the updates have come from and how to best use the information that's already out there. I get a ton of questions about how do I find this video or where should I start, and so I'm just going to do a quick tutorial of that. I then have had a theme of the questions over the last week. Some of them were in relation to, I had a really stressful week last week, and it came after a travel weekend, and it took me 4 days to get my Dr. Boz ratio, 4 days of fasting to get my Dr. Boz ratio less than 40. And I had lots of questions about, why is your sugar so high? Are you cheating? And so it's just a great reminder of saying, no, I'm human too. And if you follow me on Instagram, you're going to see that that human part shows up with a lot of mistakes, but also just a metabolism that I'm not 20, I'm actually in my 40s, and it happens to my body too. So I think it's a really good teachable moment. And then I had several athletic questions that I thought I would tie into that same kind of teaching. So, provided my computer does everything I've asked it to do. I love seeing where everybody's from. That's a great beginning for me. I was looking at some of the comments before we started, and it is truly all over the globe. So thanks for tuning in. Some of you are up in the middle of the night, I think. So I just enjoy seeing the regulars, but also some new faces to say, how do I learn more about improving my own health and answering some of the questions on the ketogenic diet. So I'm going to start with, this is a look at my website, or actually a look at the YouTube channel that you're looking at right now. So there's a few things that I thought I'd take a moment to show you where I'm trying to put energy, and then where you should begin if you're new. This past week, I do a local community meeting every Friday where I say, if you want to learn more about the ketogenic diet in person, show up and join me. So it's free to the community, and I really do. I answer questions for patients. Some of my patients show up. They said, I don't want to pay for an appointment. I mean, I don't want to have an appointment. I just like the group and how much it teaches me that way. Other people have just said, I've read your book, or I am considering the ketogenic diet. So I had a lady show up this past week who's actually a patient of mine for many years, and she said, I read the book about a year ago, and I think I'm ready to do something about my sugars being as high as they are. And so she came to the keto meeting, and she was overwhelmed, and she's like, I feel like I'm in the middle of a college course that is too advanced. And I said, no, don't do that. This is meant to be a place where you can come and we can answer questions from beginning to end. But I really pride myself on making sure that the steps you take through the ketogenic diet are super appropriate, and that we can level up to some pretty advanced doctorate mitochondrial conversations, but that's not where I spend most of the time. I spend most of the time thinking, I'm talking to my mom or my dad and saying, how could I explain it to them in a way that they would understand? I've got 3 teenage sons, so I often will imagine them saying, would they get it? And so I'm trying to translate what the science says about the ketogenic diet into tidbits that allow you to enjoy this diet without being worried about your health. So the reason I pulled up this screen is I want you to look at the different slide decks here. So these are I think there's over 170 videos that I've put out there now, and I wanted to show you how to start. So if you're new to the ketogenic diet, this playlist up here called All Things Keto is one of the first slide decks that I did. I actually did this one when most people weren't watching me. So it was, there's 44 different videos in that one. You can see the 44 next to it. So if you look on my YouTube channel and say all things keto, you can watch them in sequential order. And I just made a little blow up of this. You can see that step 1 is this really basic idea that fat is really your friend, especially if you've had any advice for the last 30 years about a low fat diet. It can be really odd to hear all this high fat talk. So that, again, only 2.5 minutes long. The second one, I actually did put in an interview with Grandma Rose. It just really, we were very new at this process, but I think the interview with Grandma Rose has been really well received. And then I went through, slide 2 is just keto for beginners. How do I start? What are the 4 rules for ketosis? Number 5, what about ketoacidosis? And again, they're really short, like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Some of them get up to 10 minutes, but boy, I've just had a really positive feedback that if you're a beginner, that's a great place to start. It gets you all the basics. You can watch one by one, and then you can see me do good or screw it up. I don't pretend to be great at this. I'm definitely learning. But let's go to these other playlists, because I think this is where I have folks saying, I want more of this conversation. I've had a few people say, I just want more of an advanced discussion. And so I'm just going to show you a little bit about where I put those. We're going to skip mini lessons. I'm going to end with that because that's my newest little adventure. This third one on the top row is keto for type 1 diabetes. So usually Lachlan is on this channel with me at this time. And if you haven't been following her on Instagram, it is a great journey to watch this type 1 diabetic who has been my patient and her journey of improving her blood sugars. So many patients type in saying, Doc, how do I decrease my insulin? I'm a type 1 diabetic. And I would tell you, you should let your doctor help you. It is more difficult for a type 1 diabetic. I think I visited Lachlan, I think 3 times a week through Skype or through phone calls or through the actual visits the first 2 weeks she was doing this. And but you can see how I did it with her. And what I said was, don't change your diet. We're going to wake up your mitochondria. We're going to make sure your mitochondria know how to burn ketones before you start playing with things. She was really worried about dropping her sugar too low. And so you'll see that story. But type 1 diet, there's 18 of those. They're pretty long too. They're like 45 minutes. So my type 1 diabetics tend to have a lot of questions. I did a lot of education there, and they're live, so there's some bloopers in them, but at least you can see the reality. The next one is called Advanced Lessons, and this is after people have been ketogenic for a while and they want to know, like, how do I do this better? How do I think about this better? Carb cycling, which you hopefully haven't heard of if you're new to the ketogenic diet, but then as you get into the more like depth of this, these questions become really poignant. But trying to start with the first week of keto transition and have that conversation, it's really confusing for people. So again, this is more of the advanced lesson. There's only 14 of them in there. The next ones, the next playlist, there's only 5 videos because it's from, again, another one of my patients who was pregnant and wanted to know what are the rules with the ketogenic diet while pregnant. This is also the place where we used a continuous glucose monitor and watched to see what she learned from it. Really fascinating. And we were both sad when she realized you absolutely have to have a prescription to get a continuous glucose monitor. I think that rule should change. That's really silly. But her name is Kylie, and I just want to say congratulations, because Kylie delivered a beautiful baby girl this last week. And we've actually tried to connect with her in the last couple of weeks, but she was in the last couple of weeks of her first pregnancy and just was dealing with every angle that she could possibly handle at that point. A couple more things. Keto consults with Dr. Boz. For those of you that follow Jennifer Marie, she is my favorite cook. I think of her cooking advice is parallel to my medical advice, which is very relational, very down to earth. It's meant for busy people. She has a wonderful cookbook out there that I actually let my boys say, anything you can cook in this cookbook, you win points in my area. So her cookbook is called the Keto Cookbook, Keto for Busy People. The Keto Cookbook for Busy People. Am I doing that right? I don't have it in front of me, and that's kind of embarrassing that I can't find the title. if anybody knows the title, just type it in right there in the show notes, because keto cooking for busy people, that might be it. Anyway, Jennifer Marie, keto cooking. There's one cookbook. It's amazing. It's on the top of every book review in Barnes and Noble, in Costco. So she's having quite the success with her cookbook. All right, a couple more. The best of Dr. Boz, best of Live with Dr. Boz. There's 39 videos there, and I'll tell you where those came from. These videos that are on Sunday night are rather long, and the consults are rather long, and I had so many people commenting saying, I just don't have the time or focus to scroll through and find what I needed to know. So I've taken snippets of those conversations, and especially if I talk about magnesium, I'll try to take 2 or 3 snippets from different areas where I've talked about it and really give you the punchline of what I think about magnesium. So it's, again, repurposed and shorter videos just to give you the background of some of the key things to a ketogenic diet. And then you can go live with Dr. Boz. That's another one. Again, at the beginning of this, I did a lot of just push record, answered questions. There's no slides in those, but I think they're pretty educational. I tried to use patient information to get the content for those. And then the last one is, again, just 12 of my favorite ones. So I tell you that as a way to introduce you to what is the second box up there with only 3 videos. 2 of them are live. The third one comes out tomorrow. And they're called mini lessons. And so what I've done is tried to say, again, those new patients where they may have the rules of a ketogenic diet figured out, but they really don't understand what to do with it next. Or they've got some of the things that are super common questions, like how do you think about fuel, or how do you think about ketosis, and how do you compare them? I am a really big advocate for the brain transitions that happen on a ketogenic diet. So the minis that talk about brains are, again, one of my favorite places to put energy, but also a very powerful passion comes out when I start teaching about brains, what the data says, and how to really decrease inflammation and increase the biggest transition for that brain on a ketogenic diet. So you'll see other versions of those minis on maybe Facebook or YouTube, and they will not have my voice. I just did them as slides, as kind of a slideshow and animation, mainly because most people don't turn on the sound when they're on those mediums. For the voiceovers, I did do them on this channel, on the YouTube channel, to give you a better background of, well, how would I have explained it? I'm learning, so I love the feedback patients or folks have given us about, should we slow it down? Was it too fast? Did you understand our point? Our team has worked really hard on these. They take an insane amount of time to make, but I really think as you're new into the ketogenic diet, or you're looking for how to spread information, those short little slide minis have so many purposes that can be shared throughout the YouTube, or actually Facebook, Instagram. So use those, share those, and then let us know what you think of them. You'll get another one that comes out tomorrow. So those are another place that I focus on Monday and Tuesday, actually. All right, so that kind of gives this background of what I was trying to get at with the ketogenic diet and my website. And my YouTube channel. There's lots of videos out there. I really do enjoy doing this, but finding an organization to those has been a little less than ideal. So, all right, so I am going to give a couple of shout outs for the folks that I think are watching. First of all, my son is at the National Debate Camp, National Debate Tournament in Dallas, Texas. So I want to say hi to everybody in Dallas, and a big prayer for doing a great job of those debaters over the next week. For the record, my son has an unfair advantage because I sent ketones with him. So if you've looked at any of my brain stuff, you'll see what I'm talking about there. But no, he's a sophomore in high school, and he made it to the National Debate Tournament, which I'm super proud of him. So I wish I could be there, but he will do fine without me. So the next one I wanted to say is this weekend, in 5 days, on the 21st and 22nd of this month, I will be in Pella, Iowa. And the reason I'm telling you that is that I give a workshop called Brains of Addiction from Trauma to Repair. I have advertised this on Facebook. It is free to the public. It is a response to a community trying to improve the conversation about how to repair brains, how to address brains of addiction. If you have seen it, I would love for you to put a comment in those places on YouTube, on Facebook. It is really hard for me to encapsulate what the viewers find when I do these workshops. We start on Friday night, we'll end on Saturday. It's in the city of Pella, Iowa, and I am the sole speaker. So I'm really excited to do it. It's my favorite workshop. And Pella, Iowa is just outside of Des Moines if you're kind of looking on the map. But if you go there, you do need to register. It's not super exciting, just an email to the gal. But if you're coming, I would love to meet you in person. And if you've been to the workshop, I've given this workshop probably 30 times. And if you've been, put in a comment about what you learned, because again, it helps me to remember that does make a difference, and it does encourage people that haven't been there before. All right, so that's the housekeeping. We are going to get back to some of the comments in a minute, but I'm going to first do a slide deck on something I've talked about in a couple different videos, but I've never really strung it together the way I'm about to do this. And it has in part to do with those high sugars I had last week when under a lot of stress. And then in conjunction with that, I have recently returned to the gym, which I was going to take a little break. And I took like a 6-month break, but life has seasons. So I'm back at the gym, and so I will post usually my glucose and ketones before I work out and after I work out, especially if I'm fasting. So I think it has created quite a few questions, and I know I've tackled these at some point, but I probably have never done the full string like this. So we're going to use this as a second to show you the full slide deck of this. It'll take me about 8 minutes to go through these slides, and then we'll come back and we'll ask questions about it. All right, here we go. So let's see here. Oopsie, not that one. So here we go. Why is that still doing that? There we go. Okay. Now. Okay, so should be a full screen. Okay, here we go. Where does glucose come from? Where does glucose come from? And specifically, where does the glucose come from when you're fasting? So if you haven't read my book, Any Way You Can, I take a whole chapter to talk about where glucose comes from, and they use one of the studies, the one I'm drawing out right here, to show that when the biggest place we get this data is from a study where they entered a hospital setting, and we kept them for almost a month of fasting. The fasting data was not subtle. I mean, it was a powerful change on how we had documented this before. I do want you to look off on that left side. The blood sugar is milligrams per hour. This is a rate of burning it. They did not have a blood sugar of 400. It was that they were burning glucose at 400 milligrams per hour. So again, they're looking at metabolism for this test, really advanced testing for this. And they came in after eating. So they started testing right after they had a big meal. And so really burning up that glucose is what is happening on that first phase of that first line. You'll see that is what we call phase 1. And when I wrote about the book, I really spent time unpacking each of these phases. What I like to show you next is in a completely fasted state, when you're on not on a ketogenic diet, when you're on a standard American diet, your glycogen storages are going to be pretty heartily used up by the end of that second or third day. So 24 hours, getting into that 48 hours, you should have a pretty good amount of that glycogen storage used up. Phase 4 and phase 5 turn into days. So at the end of this, it's 40 days. And you're going to see a word called gluconeogenesis, which is glucose made from proteins and glucose made from fat. And that part becomes a really important discussion that is different when you're on a ketogenic diet. So as we look, this is what the picture looks like that's in my textbook. This is out of that study. And I like folks to look across that, that area that's the top line where your glucose came from. And the glucose on phase 1 was their food and drink. The phase 2 is glycogen and a little bit of gluconeogenesis from the liver. By the end of 2 days, by that phase 3, the one that's highlighted in blue in this picture, you have more gluconeogenesis, but you're still getting some from your glycogen. By the time you get out to that end of that first week, into that second week, and by the end of that month, all of the sugar that you're finding is from making it from protein or fat. And that is a very special process that our body does in an advanced phase of ketosis. The other part that I always like folks to look at is the bottom part, which is the glucose. The brain fuel was glucose in phase 1, glucose in phase 2, glucose in phase 3, and it wasn't until you get into that end of that first week where ketones become the primary fuel for the brain. And there's a couple other videos that, especially my little mini coming out this week, is focused on some of, can we manipulate that using a different option. I just want to remind people, if you're new, glycogen is a stored sugar. So in my videos, you'll see these little characters. They're supposed to be glucose. There's reasons they have different emotions, and that is that glucose can make us feel very happy, but it also can make our head foggy. It can make us sleepy when it shoots too high. Your body does so much, has so many mechanisms built in to keep that glucose controlled, that when I look at the glucose process, I think of it as different phases give you different emotions. But when you're looking at what is glycogen, if the sugar gets too high and your body says, hey, I want to store that for later, it makes those glucogen into, kind of strings them together and tucks them in a little vacuole called glycogen. We'll come back to glycogen in just a minute. But here is what we want to talk about. Where does glucose come from when you're on the ketogenic diet? So if you think back to that process that I just talked about, I'm going to really look at that 2 to 20 weeks on a ketogenic diet. And we're really trying to say, where does your, when I was fasting last week for 4 days, and people are saying, well, how in the heck can you have such high sugars when you're on day 3? You must be eating sugar substitutes. You must be, even if I didn't have any sugar substitutes. I was black coffee and water. And if you go back and look at my numbers, it really took me till the 3rd day before my Dr. Boz ratio really went down. And you say, well, where did it come from? And part of it was I was under a much higher stress than usual last week, and I had had a weekend of travel, so that added to my stress. And that cortisol keeps sending a message to your liver to say, any of those glycogen balls left, any of that stored sugar left, and it releases the glucose from storage if it's got it hidden anywhere. The liver is one place that you store it, but your muscles are also another place that you store it. When you get further out into the ketogenic part, if you continually monitor that you have glucose, or that you're in ketosis, that your glucose numbers are measured, I would like to think of this as a Dr. Boz ratio of less than 100. It really gets you into that 2nd month, maybe sometimes at the end of the 1st month and onwards, before I can really be confident that a lot of this glucose is coming from the fats and the proteins that you eat. And I would push much more towards the fats than the proteins, knowing some of the other things we're not going to go into tonight. So again, if you haven't reviewed the Dr. Boz ratio, that is your glucose divided by your ketones. Again, there are several researchers that use a combination of glucose and ketones to help monitor the prescribed ketogenic diet for people with seizures and those that are on an augmented process for helping with a cancer regimen. They use different metrics, and I found that to be too confusing for most of the folks on this casually. So we use the Dr. Boz ratio to divide this out and look closer for what might be predictable. So I tend to look at anything under 100 I think of as a pretty good number, but if you're really trying to reach for autophagy or weight loss, I would push you to get at least your Dr. Boz ratio under 80. Remembering again that the first measurement in the morning is the highest return on investment. Those little strips cost money, and it does poke your finger. So you do have to sacrifice some blood. So if you want to do this as few as possible, the most important measurement is first thing in the morning. That's when your liver is at its easiest to predict. There's not as many other variables running around the equation that we can't see, and you're going to have the ketones. What is your baseline metabolism? What is your baseline production of ketones? When you get under 40, that's what I reach for every week. Again, this has been a huge part of getting closer to my weight loss goal, but also just really making sure that I touch on the enhanced body repair, that longevity, doing that, steady over time. It's been almost a whole, I think we're actually, this week it becomes a whole year that I've fasted once a week, with a couple of rare exceptions, but fasted once a week to get a Dr. Boz ratio of 40 or less. And my goal is autophagy. I'm again recycling everything from skin to brain to joints to heart muscles. I want the longevity. Again, the last of these is a Dr. Boz ratio under 20, and that really does push you into autophagy. This is that goal for cancer patients or for seizure patients, and that's really much more difficult. I do see folks get there, and we give them lots of praise and accolades, but the real reason we're trying to get you to measure your Dr. Boz ratio is your glucose and ketones. We want to use those to predict what is your insulin level. Insulin is a growth hormone that makes us not only grow our fat cells, but also grow things like skin tags and some debris that we don't want to be growing in our body. Excessive amounts of insulin is still the biggest predictor of heart disease. We'll talk insulin and heart disease and LDL cholesterol coming up in the next few weeks. We're working on those for you too. As you watch the Dr. Boz ratio getting under 100, by the time those folks at 200, 150, 100, they really do have a powerful improvement when I see this in my clinic. So when I look at a blood sugar of 120, ketones of 0.8, that would give you a Dr. Boz ratio of 150, still a very high number. Even if your blood sugar is 80 and your Dr. Boz ratio is 1, that's now where you get to the part where, I see lots of Dr. Boz ratios where their blood sugar is 80, but their ketones really do hang out in that 0.5, 0.6 range, and they rarely can get it higher than that. So getting that ratio down to 80 or less is a very good predictor that you will be losing weight with a ketogenic diet. If you look at some of the other really strong predictors, here's a glucose of 68 and a ketone of 1.7. The last one is again a glucose of 68, but their ketones are up there at 3.4. And again, that's a lesson for a different day to show you how to do that. But we're going to do a quick review. Glycogen is those glucose molecules put into a capsule. Vacuole is a better way to look at it. They're inside your liver. Here's one of the places where we say the first place your body tries to store that extra sugar is in your liver. The highest metabolic phase, meaning the highest, the most charged mitochondria in your body are found in your liver. There is more metabolism that happens inside your liver than all other cells combined. It is the strongest place to predict metabolism. When it gets overloaded with sugar and is constantly on a glucose-only fuel pilot, you will find the body becomes a much bigger liver. Well, the liver grows and grows and grows in hopes to keep storing this sugar for a rainy day, a day when you don't eat so much. And in our culture today, that's not very common. So to say, well, how do you get rid of this? When you stop eating, those glycogen balls start to break down and share the glucose, and they put it back into your bloodstream. And as you do that, you start to empty out the glycogen that you stored. It will fill right back up again if you eat too much sugar, because your body does protect you from those high sugars by quickly storing glycogen again. If you have a really large liver, it's lots of place you can store that glycogen again. So it can be this kind of stuck place that they get into a stall where they've got a really large liver from 20 years of high blood sugars. even if they're not diabetic, even if they're pre-diabetic, and then they go on the ketogenic diet, but they really can't get that Dr. Boz ratio any lower without a little bit of fasting. If you look at the other major deposit for where you can store all these sugars, and this is where my exercise in the last few weeks comes into play, the other place you store sugars is your muscle cells. So it's very easy to see why when your muscle cells need sugar, they would love to have that glycogen right next to the mitochondria for fuel. They'll take off and snip off a little bit of sugar, and that lactate will then swim back to the liver and be processed in for some more energy. But we put lots and lots of stored sugar in our muscle cells, even though our liver is incredibly metabolically active because of the massive number of muscle cells throughout the body. Throughout the system, you will find actually more storage of glycogen in your muscle cells than we have in our liver cells. So when I get to a phase where I'm doing my 6 months of not going to the gym is over, I've now started posting on Facebook again, or posting on Instagram about, well, what is my sugar? And the sugars pre and post workout have led to a lot of people saying, why is it so high? You're working out. Why did it go higher? And I just find it an incredibly good or opportune teaching point to say, well, if I don't ever use those muscles, I have storage of that glycogen storage throughout my body, but I haven't really asked those muscles to turn on and increase their metabolism to use them. And it's when you do that that you can see the glycogen storage from the muscles starts to decrease. And it's that regular use of those muscles that gets it even more powerful reduction in your overall blood sugars, and again, your overall insulin, which is really what we're trying to reach for. All right, the last little part of this is going to be what happens when I did that fast. So here again, all my muscles filled with a bunch of glycogen storage, and it shows in there that we took away all the glycogen storage, but it's really actually hard to do that. Your body is always going to keep some glycogen there for a dangerous level. So it's going to start recruiting the ketones to be a higher production, and then as soon as it finds any little extra sugar when you eat, you will replace that glycogen once you start eating. When you look at the athletic conversations in the ketogenic diet, this resting muscle glycogen becomes a very important part of that. So in that last picture, you saw this, this musculature with all the stored glycogen in it. And the reason you want some glycogen in your muscles is it does really help with that power or that quick energy needed to compete. So when we take away all of that, you'll hear athletes say, oh, I can't be on a ketogenic diet. I need that glucose in my muscles so that so I can be fast. And although they're right, there needs to be glycogen in your muscles, they're wrong to think that you can't have that on a ketogenic diet. So these are some of the information from the Applied Institute for Performance, Applied Science for Performance Institute. And they are my favorite people to read when it comes to the research on athletes. So what these slides are going to watch is the decline in muscle glycogen compared to people on a ketogenic diet compared to those who had high carbohydrate controls. So here are these really intense athletes, and if you look at what we're measuring along the side, the ones in red are your standard American diet. They're very athletic. These are all athletes that they're studying, and when you look at the stored glycogen in the muscles, this is the information that we can show you. At 1 month on the ketogenic diet, you can see that if we looked inside the muscle cells of the athletes that were on the ketogenic diet, they have about half as much of that stored glycogen or stored sugar in their muscles. So their quick power is not nearly as strong, as quick as the people that were on the standard American diet. When you get out to 3 months of a ketogenic diet, you've now got a replacement of some of that glycogen, and you're up to about 85% of what your standard American diet had in their muscles. So now when you're controlling how quickly can those muscles get sugar to feed those muscles to really take off on a sprint or go after the football, or that quick energy needed to start the competition. Definitely powerful improvement by 3 months. But what I really like is to say those people who train on a ketogenic diet for over 20 months, they were up to the 98% of the glycogen was back in their muscles when compared to the people on the standard American diet. And the real key to this is now they hold a striking advantage over the standard American diet, because as soon as that glycogen is missing, as soon as that sport empties all of that sugar in their muscles, now the athlete is dependent on replacing it orally in order to get that fuel and sustain that intense level of competition. However, when you compare that to the ketogenic diet, they have calories stored as fat in exponentially higher numbers to support that athlete during the competition. And their mitochondria are ready. They are ready to use their ketones as soon as the glucose is gone. So I said earlier that I have a son who is at a wrestling camp, and he said something about being on a ketogenic diet. Do I want to go through this? Let me go back to this one. He said something about being on a ketogenic diet for we train while we're on ketones, but when you compete, you can use glucose, because your body will never forget how to use glucose. It is such a default for our metabolism that it will take your body those 2 months to really become efficient at using ketones as an athlete. And you can see that 98% was the one that was at 20 months before they were really strongly competitive. Not that 85% doesn't get them a very measurable, by 3 months, a measurable level of competition. But again, the longer they practice those mitochondria using ketones, it's not that glycogen isn't being used or glucose isn't being used. It's being filled, and then it's being metabolized. Those glycogen storages are being filled, and then they're being used. And that constant turnover is actually good for the body. And the next thing people usually ask me is, well, do you need to be carb cycling on that? And we have a couple other videos on that the short answer is no, I would not be carb cycling on it. You can use carbohydrates to prepare for your meet, prepare for your competition, but I wouldn't use them routinely. The last thing that people really bring up as athletes is does keto result in muscle breakdown? Are you breaking down muscles for that gluconeogenesis? And if you go back to that original slide I had at the first part of this deck, you can say, yeah, gluconeogenesis. If you look it up in the dictionary, it says we're making glucose out of fat, and we're making glucose out of protein. Well, boy, oh boy, if you want to see the athletes run for the door, tell them that they're going to break down their muscle in a ketogenic diet. And again, that's not true here. When you look at the metabolites of muscle breakdown, we can measure that in the ketogenic diet as well as those who are on a standard American diet. And keto resulted in a small decrease in the resting muscle glycogen, but a significant increase in the intramuscular triglycerides. Oh, this isn't the slide I thought it was. I'm sorry. The point this one's making is, in that 20 months that you got to 98% of the glycogen has been returned back to that keto athlete. But what's powerful is that inside those muscle cells now you have triglycerides that have improved the access and the energy for the athlete, excuse me. Let's see, muscle glycogen baseline 12 weeks. This is just the side-by-side comparison. It's actually the same data that we just went through. So again, the baseline for the keto dieter and the baseline for the control was 75-ish. The units of this are not easy to explain. They took it. Look at that. The baseline for the keto athlete and the people they were putting on the ketogenic diet and the people that were on the standard American diet, those are comparable. When you get to 12 weeks, though, that's where you had the reduction in the stored glycogen. When you get out to, oh, this was muscle triglycerides, yeah. And then the muscle triglycerides are the stored fat that's found inside the muscle. And again, that ketogenic, the ketogenic baseline was much smaller than the baseline for the standard American diet. When you get out to 12 weeks, the amount of fat, the triglycerides stored in the muscle, ready to feed those mitochondria, this very abundant amount of energy for the competition. I mean, it's not quite double, but it is almost double the amount of triglycerides found in the biopsies of the muscles of the athletes that were keto versus the biopsy of the muscle of the athletes that were metabolic. I think this one is the last one was just to watch and look at when you do have weight loss, and I think this is what most people watching this channel would care about, is that when you look at the weight loss that happens on a ketogenic diet, it is profound how quickly we can change the chemistry and lose the weight. When looking at the type of weight loss that we have on a ketogenic diet, it really is the fat is being lost, not the protein that's being lost in their bodies. And that should mean a lot to anybody over the age of 50 as you predict how is your longevity. Are you sacrificing muscle mass by being on the ketogenic diet? This is another thing that I've had some long emails about saying, no, we have evidence to say this really is the fat loss that's happening on the ketogenic diet. All right, so that is where I'm going to stop with those slides and kind of take back to going back to the punchline here, which is as I looked back over the last couple of weeks, and you can see me posting my fasting numbers before I work out, and then posting my glucose and ketones after a 1 hour of resistance training. And people, well, why is your glucose higher? And the purpose of this slide deck was to say, watch, look at how much of your glycogen comes out of those muscle cells, raises that blood sugar, and you can say, oh, look, my Dr. Boz ratio is worse. And you say, yeah, but you are churning those sugars to empty that glycogen storage. You are really finding the health of our body is that those stored sugars don't go into those muscles and stay there for 10 years. They go into the muscle so that when the muscle is used, a quick release goes into the body or into that muscle cell, and then those sugars cycle back through the liver, and they will raise your blood sugar when you're releasing that stored sugar. What I think is powerful, though, is the ability to predict and measure this yourself. So if I get back to some of the things that I have had the strongest change of opinion, or not so much change of opinion, but just really adamant about saying, when people write in and say, Dr. Boz, and they'll ask me questions, the two things I ask them are, my best teaching tool remains the book. If you have not read the book, please, the audiobook is great. It's a quick book to listen to, but really goes through the basic lessons about what it is to get your brain thinking about how to help you be healthier, is to empower you to think through this. And the second thing I ask about is, are you checking your numbers? You cannot believe the change in the mentality that you have when you look at your numbers and you watch to say, well, I'm fine. And then they look at their Dr. Boz ratio. They look at what their blood is telling them after a glass of wine last night, after eating at 7 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. Watching what happens if they snacked throughout the day versus not. Watching what happens when they use ketones in a can, and then they stop and say, well, what did it do to my body now? Did I get my mitochondria going? And boy, those are some of the first things I tell folks that are type 1 diabetics is too, like, take the book to your doctor. It's amazing what happens when they use that. The awakening for me was when patients brought the information to me, and then I dove in really way too deep. I'm still don't think I'm out of the tunnel of information that I continue to learn about the ketogenic diet. But the second thing that I do is, I don't care if you are, my kids check their Dr. Boz ratio if they're working on something, like they're training, or they're kind of saying, what happens when I do this? And the curiosity can be so satisfied by like looking at your own numbers and then knowing what to do with those. So that is the punchline of what I wanted to cover for today's lecture. I am scrolling back and looking at some of these the comments, and we're going to do questions for a good 5 minutes here before I sign off. A couple of things. Connie Leary, I love your book. I'm listening to it and just ordered 2 books, one for me and one for lending to family members. It is so amazing. I'll tell you, that's how this channel is supported. Thank you for doing that. Again, I kind of bravely pushed print after writing the notes that I took care of my mom while doing the ketogenic diet when she had cancer. And the next best thing I've seen has been when patients not only buy the book, transform how they think about what they can learn about their own health, and then to see the next layers of a ketogenic diet play out in their decreased inflammation. The weight loss comes. I've actually had people say, "Oh, doc, I just can't do the ketogenic diet because I don't want to lose weight." And I'm like, you know what? Even if you have weight to lose with the ketogenic diet, shifting your metabolism to a fat-based mitochondrial fuel, which is what the ketogenic diet is, you're not going to overly lose weight. You're not going to plummet into skin and bones. You're going to get to a healthy weight that doesn't have inflammation in it. And I think that is where people say, I've never thought about that. It's always been the scale driving those numbers. I've answered that question a few other times, but I just want to reiterate, your body will find that weight. Your hunger and your energy will be met with fat, and the trade for that is the energy you get, the decreased inflammation, and there's almost like a side effect of improved health problems at that point. The NJ, looking forward to the next book. For those of you, I was looking to see if I don't have my headband here this week, but I have been posting my numbers for meditation, that I try to sit down, do my little meditation for 10 minutes before I write. And if I don't hit 10 birds in my little muse meditation, I should not write, because I'm going to end up throwing all of it away. It's just a waste of time. But if I can practice concentrating and shutting off those monkey in my brain, I really do find that I can put out a good section of writing. The reason that I covered that last week was to show people that if you're having trouble falling asleep, sleep is another major predictor of brain health. And people say, well, how do you train yourself to sleep better? And that Muse headband is one of the easiest. The feedback on it is so powerful that once you start to figure out how to shut down the noise in your brain, bam, you can shut down to fall asleep so much easier with less and less and less medication. Powerful. So let's just do a few other things. So Deborah Brown, I believe, being in Pennsylvania for 4 weeks, no gym time. Fasting blood sugar has slowly increased to the upper 70s from better numbers when going to the gym regularly. Yeah, and that's a great way to say, yep, your body is churning. 70s are not bad. I would be super thankful if all of my patients had blood sugars in their 70s. So congratulations. It is a reflection that you're keeping very good control of your body. But the most powerful part about that comment from Deborah is she knows her own numbers. And as much as I care about my patients, I'm never going to care as often and as much as you're going to care about you. And when you start checking what your numbers are doing, especially on a ketogenic diet, the naysayers out there that say, oh, you can't get a ketogenic diet, you can't sustain on a ketogenic diet. I get bored with it. All you have to do is keep track of a few of these numbers to show, look what happens to your metabolism. Look at the correlation to how much your energy got better. And the longer you practice keeping that metabolism at that steady level. Patrick V is another one he's shared a spreadsheet with me that I will be doing a live on his story someday, probably when I buy the new computer actually. But just a powerful improvement of what his metabolism was before he did the ketogenic diet. And now we're like several months into this, but it is amazing how much stronger his body is at producing ketones regularly, and even if things don't go right and he has some glucose, has sugar, boy, his body goes right back to burning ketones regularly, and that really is an answer that he has received the blessings for. He says that he got his Muse headband this week too, so I can't wait to see how it works in him. He's so analytical. I actually really like the conversations we have. So it'll be fun to watch him like biohack himself. Last question here. It says, Linda Marks, Muse headband or CPAP? I have CPAP wins. Okay, oxygen always outranks outranks it, but you don't wear the headband when you go to sleep. I just want you to know that. The headband is meant for training you to sort your thoughts in a way that actually has evidence-based, is teaching you what kind of beta waves, what kind of waves in the brain are you producing when you're supposed to be meditating. And if you're like me and you've actually tried to meditate, my head goes here, and I have the grocery list, and I have what the kids need to do, and I have this, and I'm like, well, I get patient prescription. I turn into a whole bunch of checklists. Or I fall asleep. That's what I did at first. And so finally, after I started using the Muse headband, and I actually learned about it at a medical conference, because there's a medical grade that you could do, but they said, this is, it had just come out. I ordered the headband. I used it faithfully for a long time, and then I kind of fell off. But I was pretty impressed when I've just been doing it again the last couple of weeks while I'm writing this book, and I can't believe how much better my birds are. If you want to know a little bit more about how that's going for me, you can join me on Instagram. I do post those and show the Instagram numbers. I think I try to post birds, and I usually do it right before I focus for at least a couple hours on writing. And then again, whenever I'm fasting, which I start on Sundays, I try to fast until I get a Dr. Boz ratio of 40. If you're fasting with me, share your numbers with the Dr. Boz ratio. If you put hashtag Dr. Boz ratio into Instagram, boy, I have found so many folks really. Oopsie, I didn't mean to turn off that comment here. Live comments are supposed to be seen. Sorry. That Dr. Boz ratio is how I find what you're doing, and then I try to give you a check in on how you're doing. So I am signing off. That's 52 minutes, a little longer than I was hoping to go, but thank you for tuning in. Again, once this live turns off, all of these comments disappear. So if you do put in a little comment to say, did you like this slide deck? I actually can see those. I can see these comments by watching, but I can only see the ones after the show on the replay if you type it in when we're done. So if you do that, it super helps me. I'm signing off. Dr. Boz, helping your health one ketone at a time. Thanks again for all of you that have bought the book any way you can. I'm at 900 book reviews on Amazon, so it's a special thank you to all of you that have done that for me. It is a true gift. I really appreciate it. Thanks again. We'll see you next week. Improving your health one ketone at a time.